Hey everyone, ready to dive into something super important for anyone who's around youth sports,
Yeah.
especially girls athletics.
Definitely.
We're tackling ACL injuries,
Big one.
but not just those ones you see after, like a huge collision on the field. Today's deep dive, it's about the non-contact injuries.
Right. Those ones that happen without a big hit.
Exactly, and that's what makes this so crucial, right?
Absolutely.
We're going to really get into why these injuries, they seem way more common in female athletes, especially during puberty.
Yeah. It's a big question.
It is. And to be clear, we're talking about those sudden twists, landings, changes in direction,
Yeah.
those movements that seem so normal,
Everyday stuff, but
but they could put so much stress on the knee.
so much. And it's not just about, a few months on the sideline if it happens.
Right.
A serious ACL injury, that can increase the risk of lifelong problems, like osteoarthritis. We're talking about joint pain, limited mobility for years.
Years to come. Okay, so before we go any further, got to mention the research itself.
Right, got to be careful there.
We're looking at potential risk factors here, not like this, then that guarantees.
Yeah, it's about understanding what might make an injury more likely, not saying we can predict the future.
Exactly. More about empowering you with the knowledge. So let's unpack this whole puberty thing. The research found younger girls, even with, less experience playing,
They're actually less prone to these injuries?
compared to girls who've gone through puberty. What's that about? It can't just be because, little kids are clumsy. Right.
No, not at all. It's the changes happening inside, the biomechanics of it all. Think of it like this. During a growth spurt, your bones, laser focused on getting longer
Okay.
and fast. The problem is muscles and tendons, they don't always keep up at the same pace.
So it's like a mismatch inside is happening.
Exactly, a growth mismatch. And that's what creates that recipe for knee instability. Now you've got these longer limbs acting like levers, more force on joints that haven't caught up, even if they're doing the same movements as before.
Hold on. I need to picture this.
Okay.
So if my arm is longer now after a growth spurt and I swing it the same as before, the force my elbow is actually greater because it's a longer lever.
Exactly. Now picture that in your legs during those big growth years. That's a ton of extra stress. And the ACL, that's a key stabilizer right there in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so longer limbs, more leverage, more force. Got it. But there's got to be more.
Oh, yeah. One of the biggest findings was about knee abduction and these injuries.
Knee abduction, that's when your knees kind of collapse inward.
Exactly.
Right.
Especially when landing from a jump.
I've seen that so much, especially when those young athletes are tired.
Yeah, and that's a big warning sign, because when your knees do that, buckle in. It puts way more stress on the ACL, especially when it's combined with other movements. Like internal rotation, you're twisting the knee inwards while it's bending.
Oof, that sounds rough.
It's a bad combination. The study found those two together. That's a major risk factor.
So it's not just about the knees bending, it's the whole leg, how it moves as one unit.
You got it. And this is interesting. There's some thought that specializing in just one sport too early might actually be part of this knee abduction problem.
Really. Like focusing on one sport too soon could be bad.
Well, it's not totally conclusive, but the research hints at it. Think about it. Multi-sport athletes, they're always using different movements. Their coordination and balance is challenged in all these ways.
So they're more adaptable.
Yeah, like they're building a bigger movement vocabulary. And that might mean better knee protection in the long run.
Makes sense. It's all connected. Okay, let's get to another piece of this puzzle, and this one's kind of weird.
Oh, yeah, this is where it gets interesting.
It's about knee flexion, bending your knees.
Right, the classic advice.
Bend your knees.
Yeah.
But the research on how that connects to ACL injuries during puberty, it's messy.
It is.
Really? That's surprising. You'd think more bend equals less stress on the ACL.
In theory, yeah. But here's where it gets tricky. They looked at knee flexion at different points during a landing. And the way these athletes were landing, their overall movement, it seemed to matter more than just how much they were bending.
So it's not just bend, it's how you bend as part of the whole movement.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, does the type of jump, the type of landing, does that affect how they use knee flexion? Because they looked at different jumps, so those variations, they might be why the findings are all over the place.
Okay, so knee flexion, still important, but it's not the whole story. It's the how and the when and the type of movement. It all matters.
Exactly. It's way more nuanced than people think. And that's important to remember when we talk about what makes a good training program. Maybe we should shift gears, talk about what we can do with all this info.
Yes, give us the actionable stuff.
Okay, so strength and conditioning, that's key. But We got to be thinking about programs that focus on something called neuromuscular control. And early, before those peak puberty years.
Neuromuscular what now? Break that down for me. What's that look like in training?
So it's about teaching the body to land right, safely, efficiently, not just getting muscles bigger for no reason.
Okay, so not just lifting weights.
Not just that, think plyometrics, balance exercises, agility drills, stuff that really challenges coordination, how fast you react.
Training smarter, not just harder.
Exactly. Of course, strength is still important. You need strong hamstrings, for example, to support that knee joint.
Right. Got to have that foundation.
But it's got to be balanced with flexibility, too. Can't forget that.
So it's like set them up before those growth spurts hit hard. Give girls the best chance to handle those changes without hurting themselves.
You got it. Early intervention is huge. The sooner we equip these athletes, especially before puberty, the better.
Okay, so we've talked about what's up with the knee joint itself, but zoom out a bit here. What about the hips, the ankles? How do they fit into this whole ACL picture?
Ah, great point. This study we're talking about, it really focused on the knee in isolation.
Right.
But the body's not like that. It's all connected, this kinetic chain.
Like a domino effect. One thing's off, messes up the rest.
Exactly. So during those growth spurts, if the muscles around the hips and ankles, if they're not strong enough, flexible enough to handle those longer legs,
No.
it's going to cause problems that end up putting more stress on the knee.
So the knee's like trying to make up for other weaknesses.
Yeah, compensating.
Yeah.
And not in a good way. For example, if those hip abductors, those muscles that help you move your leg out to the side, if those are weak,
Yeah.
that can lead to that knee collapsing inwards, the abduction we talked about.
Yeah, we know that's bad news for the ACL.
Big time. Or if the ankle isn't flexible enough, can't dorsiflex well.
It's pointing your toes out.
Yeah, like towards your shins. If you can't do that well, it messes with how you land from a jump, more strain on the knee.
So really got to think about it all working together.
It's all a team effort. And if one player's not doing their job...
You're going to have a bad time.
Okay, so if we want to prevent these injuries in girls, can't just look at the knee by itself. Nope. Got to address the whole chain, those weak links.
Find those potential problems before they become actual problems.
Exactly. Holistic training. That's what we're talking about. Strength, flexibility, the whole lower body.
So not just knee exercises, but hip abductors, ankle mobility, core strength, all that.
It all matters. And again, the earlier, the better. Give these athletes the best chance to build those good habits from the ground up.
This is for the coaches listening, the parents, the athletes themselves. Got to broaden how we think about preventing these ACL injuries.
The knee is just one chapter in a much bigger story. And the more we understand that story,
the better we can keep everyone healthy and playing the sport they love. But there's more to it than just the physical stuff, right?
You're right. One thing that really stood out in the research, the emphasis on education.
Yeah, like what do you mean by that? Education about what?
About their bodies, for one thing. Especially for young women. We got to make sure they get it, that their bodies are changing in huge ways during puberty. And that those changes, they directly affect their risk of getting hurt.
So it's like empowering them, right?
Totally. Knowledge is power, cliche but true. If these athletes understand why these injuries happen more during those years, it gives them more agency, right?
So advocate for themselves, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can take ownership of their training, speak up if something feels off. It changes the whole conversation. Instead of just do this because I said so, it's here's the why. This is how you protect yourself. Stay in the game longer.
Love that. Play with confidence, not fear. And I guess that's for anyone listening, no matter what your role is in this world of youth sports.
Absolutely. Coach, parent, even the athletes themselves, knowing these risk factors is step one. Talk to your athletic trainers. Don't be afraid to try different training styles. And man, just keep those conversations going, open and honest.
So to wrap up this whole deep dive on ACL injuries, especially in those puberty years, I want folks to take this with them. It's not about being perfect. No one can avoid every single jump or twist the wrong way.
It's going to happen.
Right. It's about awareness, being proactive, and honestly being your own advocate, or if you're a parent, coach, whatever, being their advocate.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The more we know, the better we can protect these athletes.
Knowledge is power. Got to play the long game, right? Not just the next game. That's a wrap on another deep dive, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon with more to get you thinking and keep those conversations going.